answer to the war in the Vale and the death of Corwin Corbray for King's Landing was not long in coming. Lord Rowan sent one last flight of ravens to the Vale, commanding those lords supporting the Mad Heir and the Gilded Falcon to lay down their arms at once, lest they provoke the throne's displeasure. When no reply was forthcoming, the Hand took counsel with Alyn Velaryon, the Oakenfist, and made plans to bring the rebellion to an end by force. At long last, with the coming of spring, it was thought that the high roads through the Mountains of the Moon would once again be passable. 5,000 men set out up the King's Road under the command of Sir Robert Rowan, Lord Thaddeus' eldest son. Levies from Maidenpool, Darry and Hayford swelled their number on the march, and once across the Trident they were joined by 600 Freys and 1,000 Blackwoods under Benjicot Blackwood himself, making them around 9,000 strong, entering the mountains. A second attack was launched by sea. Rather than making use of the royal fleet commanded by Sir Gedmund Peake the Great Axe, his predecessor's uncle, the Hand turned to House Velaryon for the required ships. This made sense given the personal nature of the mission for Lord Alyn, as well as his reputation for warfare at sea. The Oakenfist would command the fleet himself, whilst his wife, Lady Baela, went to Dragonstone to comfort her widowed twin, and incidentally make certain that Lady Rhaena did not attempt to avenge her husband's death upon her young dragon mourning. The last thing anyone wanted was a dragon on the battlefield, after the death and destruction of the Dance of the Dragons. The army Lord Alyn was to carry to the Vale would be commanded by Lady Lara Rogare's brother, Morado Rogare, Lord Rowan announced. That Lord Morado was a fearsome fighter none could dispute. Tall and stern, with white blonde hair and blazing blue eyes, he looked the very image of a warrior of old Valyria, men said, and bore a long sword of Valyrian steel he called Truth. His prowess notwithstanding, however, the Lyseni appointment was deeply unpopular. While his brothers Rogerio and Lotho were both fluent in the common tongue, Morado's grasp of the language was limited at best, and the wisdom of putting a Lyseni in command of an army of Westerosi knights was widely questioned. Lord Rowan's enemies at court, amongst them many who owed their offices to Unwin Peake, were quick to say that this was proof of what they had been whispering for half a year, that Thaddeus Rowan had sold himself to the Oakenfist and the Rogares. Such mutterings might not have mattered had the assault upon the Vale had been successful. Though the Oakenfist easily swept aside the Gilded Falcon's sail sails to capture the harbour at Gulltown without losing a single man himself, the army lost hundreds of men taking the port walls by storm, and thrice as many during the house-to-house fighting that followed. After his translator was slain battling in the streets, Morado Rogare had great difficulty communicating with his own troops. The men did not understand his commands, and he did not understand their reports. Chaos ensued. At the other end of the Vale, meanwhile, the high road through the mountains proved far less open than had been assumed. Sir Robert Rowan's host found itself struggling through the deep snows in the higher passes, slowing their advance to a crawl, and time again their baggage train came under attack by savages native to these mountains, descendants of the first men driven from the Vale by the Andals thousands of years before. There were skeletons in skins armed with stone axes and wooden clubs, Ben Blackwood had said later. But so hungry and so desperate they could not be deterred, no matter how many were killed. Soon the cold and the snow and the nightly attacks began to take its toll. High in the mountains, the unthinkable happened one night. As Lord Robert and his men huddled around their campfires, in the slopes above, a cave mouth was visible from the road, and a dozen men climbed to see if it might offer them some shelter from the wind. Bones scattered about the mouth of the cave might have given them pause, yet they pressed on, and roused a dragon. 16 men perished in the fight that followed, and 60 more suffered burns before the angry brown worm took wing and fled deeper into the mountains, with a ragged woman clinging to its back. That was the last known sighting of Sheepstealer and his rider, the dragon seed, Nettles, recorded in the annals of Westeros. Though the wildlings of the mountains still tell tales of a fire witch who once dwelled in the hidden valley far from any road or village, one of the most savage of the mountain clans came to worship her, the storytellers say. Youths would prove their courage by bringing her gifts, and were only accounted men when they returned with burns to show they had faced the dragon woman in her lair. Their encounter with the dragon was not the last peril encountered by Sir Robert's host. By the time they reached the Bloody Gate, a third of them had perished in the wildling attacks, or died from cold or hunger. Amongst the dead was Sir Robert Rowan, crushed by a falling boulder when the clansmen toppled half a mountainside down upon the column. Bloody Ben Blackwood assumed command upon his death. Though still half a year shy of manhood, Lord Blackwood by this time had such experience of war as men 4 times his age. At the Bloody Gate, the entrance to the Vale. The survivors found food, warmth, and welcome, but Sir Joffrey Arryn, the Knight at the Bloody Gate and Lady Jane's chosen successor, saw at once that the crossing had left Blackwood's men unfit for battle. Far from being a help to him in his war, they would be a burden.